There, I think. We're good.
Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
And thank you for your patience. The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
When evening had come, Jesus said to the disciples, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took with them in the boat. They took him just as he was. Other boats were with them. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke Jesus up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Jesus woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" They were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Christ.
You may be seated, and I invite you to pray with me for the blessing of the Holy Spirit. Let us pray. Loving God, we thank you for guiding our paths through our storms, for getting us from one place of faith to another. We ask that in this day, as we remember, and perhaps our storms are in the front of our minds, that we remember to trust and to ask you for your guidance, and to take the stern, to take the rudder, and to move us to where we need to go. And I pray this in Christ's name. Amen. If you look through the scriptures, there's one thing, one symbol, one place that is going to be entirely important to. And, well, pretty much the whole thing. And as humans, it's essential to our being. And that's water. If you look back at the beginning of creation, God had demonstrated power over the water. And water in the ancient Near East was seen as symbolic for chaos, for the craziness of life. When things would get out of order, the wilderness would overcome us, God's voice could put the wilderness at ease. God's voice could put the sea to be still. In today's gospel lesson, we hear from the disciples in Christ. And as Jesus asked them to go across the Sea of Galilee to the other side. Now, a few things that are kind of interesting about this is that this isn't a good time to go on a trip. This isn't a good time to go on a pleasure cruise across the sea. It was evening. It was getting dark out. And as it got darker and darker, I imagine the disciples were questioning, "Christ, why are we leaving now? Why not wait till morning?" The other thing about this is that Jesus doesn't stay awake. He goes to sleep. And he doesn't even see or experience the storm. He's sleeping on a cushion at the back of the boat, at the stern of the boat. And I'm not talking about an ocean liner, but a 27-foot boat, which maybe was about 4 feet high and about 7 feet wide. So if you were to look at it here in Holy Trinity, it would probably be like from here to maybe here, and from me to maybe where Lynn is, and about this deep, with 13 people inside. A fishing boat. A boat that was their livelihood. It was their daily tool that brought in fish, it brought in money, it made their living, it met their budget. They took this tool and they were told to go to the other side. Now, in our day and age, going to the other side might look a little different because I don't know what the numbers are at Holy Trinity, but I don't think there's a lot of fishermen in here. Even though we do have a great lake. The Sea of Galilee was a place for fishermen. It was a sea that was about 6 miles wide and about 13 miles like north to south. If you compare that, that's quite smaller than our Lake Erie. But these fishermen were going from one side to another, just as one of us might be going through a storm in our lives. In 2013, there was a man by the name of Alex Lewis. He was a resident of England. He was a father, he was a husband, and he was a business owner with his wife. They owned a bar and I guess it was bar and motel, like a place you could travel to and have a pint and then go to sleep. And one day, he was feeling awfully ill. His wife thought it was a cold. He brushed it off. There were other duties, things to do. But Alex got sicker, and he got more sick. And he was vomiting, and his head was pounding, and his skin started turning different colors, and what doctors call toxic shock syndrome, caused by Strep-A. He was rushed to the ER as his limbs began to turn colors, purple and brown. He could see his body dying in front of him at 33 years of age, and a gregarious, infectious spirit. The doctors continually came in to meet with his wife to discuss what they would have to do next to spare his life. The first time, they said it was the legs. They thought it might have been just the feet, but they had to take the legs. Then the doctor thought it would just be the left arm, but then they couldn't save the right arm either, and they had to take the right arm here. His lips began to die. His nose began to die. The top of his ears began to die. And Alex began to fall into the despair of all the loss that he had gone through. The days went on. Alex got a graft for new lips. He began to work with prosthetics. And although he wasn't able to start the tea when his wife came home from the family business, he was still able to bring his smile and humor. Alex began to rehabilitate with prosthetics. He began to work with them as far as the healthcare system in England would allow him. Until one day they said there was no more money for his treatment. And so Alex began to tell his story, not looking for pity, never for pity, but to tell his story of how he is called to be a father, to be a husband, to be a business owner and how some prosthetics might help him to do so. Little by little, year by year, Alex grew in strength. At one point, it was a dream of his to go into the metro parks with his wife and son and ride bikes. But he couldn't afford the three-wheel bike. Until he told his story to the documentarians. Until told his story to the beneficiaries. To those who would donate to his cause. And Alex then became a bike rider. Or a trike rider, as it were. Alex began to become stronger. And not only accept his life as it is, but also to continue on his faith journey, on his journey, to be a husband, to be a father, to be a business owner, and adding a new call to be an inspiration to people everywhere who are going through the storms of life. These storms are the wind. They're the water that swamps our boats. It swamps us when we get a diagnosis. It swamps us when we are in a car accident and need rehabilitation. It swamps us when life changes and we didn't say so or make that decision. It's the call to go to the other side in the middle of the night, trusting only that God has called us, and being swamped by wind and by water. But as you notice in the story, as you notice with Jesus and the disciples, the boat did not sink. The boat made it to the other side. And the disciples, thank goodness, they didn't run off and disappear into the city and leave Jesus. And so one's got to wonder, why did God do this? Why did he do this? It seems like a very cruel example or a very cruel lesson. And the only thing I can think of is that Christ was teaching us to trust in the middle of the storm. Not to fear that we will perish into nothing or perish into the chaos of life, but to trust that all we have to do is ask. All we have to do is have faith in the call, and that if we ask, Christ will steer us to where we need to go. If we look at our world, one of the things that is common is the desire to get more assets, more fame, to protect us in some way. And if we look in history, in the history of boats, we see there was, of course, the most famous big boat that ended in a disaster, the Titanic. Now, the difference between the Titanic and Jesus' small fishing boat, well, was that one was made of wood and was 27 feet, while one was made of steel and was 883 feet. Jeez. I'm going to get my words right. 883 feet. And from the bottom to the top on Jesus' boat was 4 feet. The Titanic was 150 feet. The width on Jesus' boat was 7 feet. The Titanic was 97 feet. And the people who built it said it was impossible to sink. Now think about that as a community or a nation or a person. Blindly thinking that because they have become so big, they are now unsinkable. So powerful that now they can rest and blindly go through life, ignoring what is around and who is around and who needs help. It is the community that forgets its neighbors, that sees people not for the person that they are, but sees them for only the exterior, that sees people not as fellow travelers from this side of faith to the other, but sees people as what they see only on the outside, as what their Facebook says, as what their dress says, as what their car says, as what their house says, as what their job says, as what the town they live in says. And yet, the Titanic sank, and Jesus' boat, swamped with water, made it across because the disciples were faithful and aware of what was going on. Perhaps in your life, you are aware of what's going on. You see your neighbors who are in storms, and you help them to get that water out. Maybe you're aware of your other neighbors who are going through a wonderful time. And instead of the world getting on someone who's in joy and who is happy, perhaps you are also celebrating with them too. Jesus is showing us today to trust and have faith in how to go about the storms and the sunshine in life. May your trek across the waters be pleasant. May God help you and send people to assist you with the swamping of your boat when you need it. And may you also be of assistance to others, also joining their parties too. Amen.